Hello and welcome. I'm Mark Smith. I'm a sales engineer with Okta, and today we will be looking at the Okta workflow template called User Data Enrichment and how to enable that template. But before we get into the detail, let's have a look at the problem. A user registration process can often include a large amount of data. This obviously leads to a bad registration experience and can lead to registration abandonment. What this workflow does is uses the AWS Lambda connector to actually look up associated values based on a single value that the user might have entered in on the registration form. These associated values can then be updated onto the user's profile. So we have all the data that we required, but the end result is that the user has had to enter in less amount of data, thus leading to a better user experience. Okay, let's have a look at the flows included with the template. Once you add the template to your workflow instance, the folder is going to contain 3 separate flows. The first 2 flows, 1.0 and 1.1, that's a utility flow that is used just to load up the DynamoDB table. It's only designed to be used once. We'll go through that as part of the setup process. The main flow will be this 2.0 update user profile, and this is the one that's going to initialize based on the user create and go and call the Lambda connector, retrieve that data from the DynamoDB table and populate the user's profile in Okta. So that's the main flow. There's one single table that's included with the template, this sample zips data. It's yet to be populated, but we'll be populating that as part of the setup process. This table is used to load up the DynamoDB table. Okay, as per the setup instructions, this is the steps that we're going to follow to actually set up everything required to get this template working. So we're going to start in AWS. We're going to actually create a DynamoDB table, and then we're going to move on to the Lambda setup and create the required role and function that's going to be used to actually populate and interact with the DynamoDB table. We're going to set up our Okta tenant, so there's a bit of configuration that needs to happen in there. We're obviously going to set up the workflow that includes importing the sample data, and then we're going to load up the DynamoDB table with that utility flow in that comes with the workflow template. Okay, step number 1, we're going to create the DynamoDB table. I've already logged into the AWS console, and I'm going to go to the DynamoDB subconsole. Obviously click on create table. As per the documentation, I'm going to call it zips and the key underscore ID. All the other defaults are fine, so just hit create. And then once that's done, we can obviously see the default configuration, tables created, and it's obviously going to be empty. Okay, step number 2, we're going to create a policy and a role that can be used to interact with our DynamoDB table. In the AWS console, go to IAM under the security menu and open up the subconsole. First thing we need to do is go and create a new policy. Once this comes up, just go and hit the create policy button. And we're going to go straight to the JSON tab, and this is where you need to copy and paste that sample that was supplied in the documentation, and just replace the default with that sample that's been supplied. And then just go next. Don't need to add any tags, and just go review. Now we just need to give it a meaningful name. Just create a meaningful name there, don't need to worry about a description, and just go create policy. Once that's done, we can now use that policy within a role. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go to roles, and we're going to go create a new role. We're going to select the AWS service, which is already pre-selected to select Lambda, and next we're going to click on permissions, and then we're going to look for our policy. So just do a search, and we found it there, and we're going to hit next. Don't need to add any keys, and give the role a meaningful name. And create role. And then we can move on to the next step. Now, as the second part of step number 2, we're going to create the Lambda function. In the main menu, go to the Lambda submenu. Once we're in there, click on create function. Give the function a meaningful name, and under permissions, we're going to use an existing role, and this is where we're going to select the role that we've created in our previous step. And there is the role, so there we go. I'm going to actually select that and now go create function. And then once it's created, what we're going to do is we're going to replace the existing sample code with the code sample that's provided in the documentation. So I'm just going over, I'm just going to copy that and going to paste it back into here. And once it's copied and pasted, just go deploy. And this is going to verify if there's any errors. And obviously it's all okay, changes have been deployed, it's all green. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to go and test the function just to make sure it's working correctly. So under the test menu, I'm going to go test, doesn't really matter what you call it. And I'm going to again go back to the documentation, and I'm going to actually copy the sample JSON from the documentation and replace that with the default here. Once I've done that, I'm going to go and create my test. Once I've done that, I can actually go and execute my test and verify that it's actually working correctly. You can see it's running now, and the test has completed, and doesn't look like there's any errors. If I go back up to the main menu and go to the DynamoDB submenu, I can then have a look at the tables and have a look at the zips table that I've just previously created. And if the test was all successful, then I'm going to have one item here, and which I do. So that test was successful, and it successfully created an item in the DynamoDB table via the Lambda function. So we're almost ready to start on our next step. Okay, we're up to step number 3. This is your Okta tenant setup. Log on to the admin console and go to the directory self-service registration menu. Make sure that self-service registration is enabled, and that the tick here for show sign up on the login screen. Then what we're going to do is we're going to add in additional fields for user input. So click edit and go down, and what we want to do is select the zip code field and add that to the registration form. No need to make it required, it can just be optional, and that's all we need to do. And just click save. And then once that's saved, if you go back to the logon screen and go to sign up, we should now see the zip code. So that's ready to go. So that's all we need to do in step number 3. We're up to step number 4, which is the Okta workflow setup. The first part of this step is to create your Lambda connector in Okta workflows. But to be able to create that connector, we need a access key and secret, and we need to generate that over in AWS. So go to the main menu in the AWS console and go to IAM. Go to the subconsole, and what we're going to do is we're going to go to the users menu, and then we're going to create a new user. And just give the user a meaningful name. I'm just going to call it the Okta user, and it's programmatic access type of user, and click next for permissions. And we're going to attach an existing policy directly, and we're going to type in AWS Lambda, and we're going to choose the Lambda full access, and we're going to go next. Don't need to do anything here, and go create user. Once the user is created, we have a access key and a access secret. So what you need to do is just save those off, because we're going to need to use those in Okta workflows. So while we've got that open, I'm just going to open up Okta workflows, and we're actually at the connectors menu in my workflow instance, and I'm going to go and create a new Lambda connector. Let's give it a meaningful connection name. And now what we need to do is copy over the access key and secret. So if I go back, I can copy the key, put the key in, and then go back, and I'm going to copy the secret and put that in, and then choose your region. Make sure that's correct, and then just hit create. And if it created successfully, you'll see that it's actually got a green tick against that connector. And now we can move on to the next part of step number 4. Okay, we're up to the second part of step number 4. So once you've actually added the template to your workflow console, open up the folder, and you'll find there's 3 flows inside that folder. We need to go into the second and third flow to update the Lambda connector to the one that we've just created. So just go in and find the Lambda card, choose the connector we've just created, and if it's updated successfully, we should be able to then see the function that we've previously created. So you want to select that and select save, and that's all we need to do. And then save that flow. We need to go back, and we need to do exactly the same thing to the third flow in the folder. Find the Lambda card, go in and update the connector, and once the functions load, we again need to choose our my DynamoDB function we created in a previous step, and just save that. Once we've saved them all, we can go back, and what we want to do is, firstly, we want to enable all of those 3 flows. And finally, we need to update and add the data to our sample zips table. And so what we need to do is we need to go and select that table, and we need to go and select import, and choose the CSV file that came as part of the template, and then select import. And once it's done, you should have exactly 100 records of sample zip codes in that table. And that's the end of step number 4. Now we're up to the last step. It's step number 5, which is loading the DynamoDB table. And to do that, we're going to use these 2 flows, 1.0, 1.1, to load that table from the data that is currently present in the workflow table, which is these 100 sample zip code records. So all we need to do that is go and open up 1.0, which is the main flow, which calls the 1.1 subflow. And all we need to do is just run the flow using the test facility is fine. And this is going to take a few minutes to run. It's not the most performant of utilities and ways to load a table. There's probably easier ways and quicker ways to load a DynamoDB table, But again, this is just really emphasizing what Okta can do as far as workflows and connectors to Lambda, not actually using Lambda itself. So anyway, let's let that run. While it's running, we can go in and open up the zips table, and we can actually have a look at the records. You can see here that currently got 37. It'll load the full 100, and once that's finished, we can then actually run a test. Okay, we're just about ready to run a test. Before I do that, I'm just going to show you the main flow that does all the processing. Just opened up the 2.0 update user profile flow. Starts off by a user created, and so this is going to be a user registering via the self-service registration widget. Once they've registered, we're going to then do a read on the user, and we're going to fetch the information off the profile, but what we're looking at is zip code, and if they have entered a zip code on their registration form. We just want to make sure the zip code is not empty, that they have actually entered it. Otherwise, if we don't have a zip code, we're just going to exit the flow. If we do have a zip code, then we're going to format a correct request for the Lambda function using that zip code. And then we're going to call the Lambda function with that request, and once we've got the response back, which is the output, we're going to make sure firstly that the output actually has something in it. So if it's not, if it's empty, we're going to exit. If it does contain something, we're going to actually using the JSON parse card, and we're going to parse that JSON. And then what we're going to do is we're going to pull out some of the values from the JSON payload, and we're going to pull out the appropriate city, state and time zone, and then finally we're going to go and update that user's profile to add in the city, state and time zone as part of their data. Okay, now we're ready to run a test. So before we run a test, we just want to open up the zips table, have a look at the data on the table, and just randomly just pick a zip code. I'm going to use 1107 Springfield as my test. So let's go and go to the registration form for my Okta tenant. I'm going to just put in and register a user. And yeah, just give it a password. And remember the code we're going to use is 1107. 07, and go register. That's going to create that user. The user in this case is just being logged into the Okta landing page. But we'll just close down that browser, and first thing we're going to do is we're going to have a look at the flow history, and if that flow has executed successfully, we'll see that there's a record there, and once it opens up, we can actually see that the user has been processed, because that is the user that we created. And you can see here that it's read the user, it's pulled back the zip code from their Okta profile, it's gone and actually composed the request, called the Lambda function via the Lambda connector. And you can see here that now it's pulled back the data associated with that zip code, and it's gone and parsed it, and then it's gone and populated the user's profile attributes. So now if we go to the people page within your admin console, and we'll just find that user that we just created, and we're going to open up that user and have a look at their profile, and we can see, if we scroll down, that now we actually have, as well as the zip code, we have three other associated values. We've got their city, we've got their state, and we've also got the time zone. So that's an example of how the workflow can be used to pull back associated values based on a user input. Thank you very much.